Welcome to this video on the basics of functions. Functions are one of the fundamental concepts in mathematics and appear in a lot of branches of your life. So what is a function? A function can be thought of as a process or a rule that takes on an input and it produces exactly one output. So let's imagine a vending machine. You insert your money, you press a button, and you get your snack. The vending machine is like a function. The input is your money, and the output is your snack. Let's visualize this idea. Let's take an example function. Y is equal to 2x. This linear function multiplies each input by 2 to get to the output. Here's what the graph of this function looks like. As you can see, it's a straight line. The x-axis represents the input and the y-axis represents the output. So this is this is a very common type of function, a linear function. So let's look at another example of a linear function. So a linear function is usually categorized by a straight line. And one thing that we can do to a linear function is that we can shift it around. So here's an example of another linear function. Y is equal to 2x plus 1. This line is slightly shifted up on the y-axis because we added 1 to it. So there's another type of function called a quadratic function, and this is specifically to the square term, or x squared, or some quantity squared. This function creates what we call a parabolic shape. Essentially, it's this U shape that you see on the screen. Quadratic functions, you have lots of applications in physics. That's why there's a special name for it. And here's an example of a cubic function. X cubed. Another principal function, that's why it has a name. Now, there's a name for the parent of all these. So x to any integer. An integer, again, is any whole number value throughout all real numbers. So any negative whole number to all the way to the biggest positive whole number. And as long as it's x to any one of those numbers, it's a polynomial term. Polynomial functions usually have more complex shapes, and it takes on a variety of forms. So here's another important concept, domain and range. The domain represents all the possible inputs of a function, while the range represents all the sets of outputs. Let's consider the square root function. Y is equal to the square root of x. Any x value, when you square root it, must be positive. So our range is going to be from 0 to infinity. Now this concept also applies for our input, because we need to have any number when it's square rooted is going to be positive. So it's also 0 to infinity. And a parentheses means that it's exclusive because infinity isn't an endpoint. You can't touch it. But if I plugged in 0 into that function, I would be able to touch it, right? The square root of 0 is equal to 0. So that's why we put a bracket there. That shows that it's inclusive. So functions can also be transformed, right? We can take like our function x squared and we can replace it with a quantity rather. So here's what happens when we shift the graph of x squared to the right by 2 units. We take the quantity of x minus 2 squared now. These transformations help us understand function behavior. So all in all, this is a quick video understanding key concepts in functions, and this will help you in your future math, enabling you to describe relationships for functions, and is a prerequisite to higher math. Thank you.